I'll show and share that link with you. If everyone, I think everyone here is on the mailing list one way or another for More Construction Group. If you are, then you'll get it much easier. If you're not, then I'll put it in the chat box, and I'll also pull it up here, provided the technology allows me to do so.
Okay, so you'll be sending us the information that you're talking about, no?
So it's just a link on the website for More Construction
Okay.
Group that shows everything.
And we can look it up. All right, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so the first thing we're going to go over is the basics of contractors. So the first thing is the levels of tradespeople. Okay, so the first level you have is a novice, a helper. This is someone who is not part of any journeyman or apprentice program and is no way licensed for their specific trade. These guys are the ones that, you know, help carry materials, go to stores, buy things, you know, kind of keep things running and keep the guys supplied to actually perform the work. Then we have the apprentices, and the apprentices are they're in a apprenticeship program under a licensed master for their specific trade. So the trades we're talking about here are plumbing, electrical, gas fitting, and mechanical, which is HVAC. Apprentices do a lot of the trade work under the supervision and guidance of journeymans and masters. Okay, a journeyman is enrolled in a state certified journeyman program, and they are kind of the workhorses of the trade industry. So there's the ones that will do most of the residential work for all of the plumbing, electrical, gas, and mechanical systems in the state of Virginia, DC, Maryland as well. Masters have gone through an apprenticeship program, a journeyman program, and taken a very comprehensive test in their trade. The difficulty in getting them is commensurate with getting an undergraduate degree, maybe a little harder. So these people are very well experienced, not only in their trade, but also in the business requirements for their state. And you rarely see them actually out swinging hammers in the field, but it does happen. It just depends on, you know, what kind of organization that business has. So, all right, so now we're going to go over the different types of contractors. So the first one is an electrical contractor. They're tradespeople specializing in the electrical wiring of buildings, stationary machines, and related equipment. They may be employed in the new installation of electrical components or the maintenance and repair of existing electrical infrastructure. They're skilled tradesmen who require a license to perform most electrical work in the state of Virginia. Okay, so we'll cover what they are and aren't. Well, electricians are allowed to take care of all of these things. We'll also cover what they're required for. Certain things, you know, handyman, those type of people can do with electrical, but it's very limited. Okay. Plumbing contractors, they are the ones that specialize in installing and maintaining systems used for potable drinking water, sewage and drainage and plumbing systems. Again, it's required for them to have a license in the state of Virginia, DC, and Maryland as well. Same thing, we'll talk about some things that can be done for plumbing in without using a licensed plumber, but it's very limited as well. HVAC contractors, heating, ventilation, air conditioning is what the HVAC acronym stands for. I see somebody asked about, can plumbers work with gas lines? Gas lines are a specific trade license. If you look up our license at More Construction Group, we have a special certification for gas lines. So just because they're licensed plumbers doesn't mean that they are licensed to work on gas. You want to make sure to check that separately. They install, maintain, repair heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and steam distribution systems too. All of those steam heat properties throughout the district, that they do need to be licensed HVAC technicians to work on those. They should also have their gas certifications to be able to work on the boilers themselves. Okay. Just like the electrical and plumbing contractors, they do require special licensing in order to perform their work. Okay, in DC, Maryland, and Virginia.
But for this restaurant to truly turn around,
guys, really quick, please just keep your Zoom on mute so we can avoid all the background noise.
Yeah, I think we have quite a few people attending here, so
Yeah.
We got to keep it quiet if we can. So getting back to this gas line question, gas fitting requires the installation or maintenance of piping which conveys gas from the gas main to the fixtures of a building. In the state of Virginia, a special license must be attained for this type of work. Some plumbers and HVAC techs will hold this. And this is an important point to make. In the state of Virginia, work performed on gas systems by unlicensed individuals may be considered a misdemeanor, okay? So gas is very dangerous. It's very important to make sure that it's handled properly. You never, ever, ever want to have anyone who doesn't know what they're doing working on gas lines in a building. It's incredibly unsafe. So much so that you can actually get charged with a misdemeanor for having unlicensed gas work done in a property. In the state of Maryland, you can also have your license suspended or revoked for recommending a contractor that works on gas lines. So you always want to make sure, especially with this one, that you're careful and make sure that you're hiring the right people and recommending the right people to perform that type of work. All right, before we get into the next section for the levels of contractors, does anyone have any questions about the types of contractors themselves?
I have a quick question.
Sure.
So for Virginia, Maryland, and DC, does the contractor has to have all three licenses, or can they be licensed in Virginia and work in DC, or how does that work?
So there's a couple things to that question, okay? So each you're talking about a general contractor. If a general contractor doesn't have a license for a specific trade, they can still contract to perform the work. They just have to sub it out to a subcontractor who is appropriately licensed. So for instance, Moore Construction Group, our company is licensed for building, plumbing, electrical, and gas, but not for HVAC. So we sub out our HVAC. Other GCs might be licensed only for building and not for, the trades as well. Totally fine, totally legitimate. You just have to make sure that the proper permits are being pulled for the other trades with reputable companies.
Okay, so if I have a license in DC or in Virginia, I can subcontract in DC, but with their permits, with the DC license, correct?
So that's the second part of the question, and the answer is no. Every single state, Maryland, Virginia, and DC, all want their money and their registrations. So every single state that you do business in, you need appropriate licenses for. You cannot use a Maryland license, for instance, to do electrical work in DC or vice versa. A long time ago, about 10 years ago, DC did reciprocate with Virginia, but it's been a long time since that's been allowed. So no, you have to make sure that the contractor is properly licensed in the state they're working on.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Sure thing. Okay. Anything else? All right, so now we're going to get into the contractor basics for the classes of contractors in the state of Virginia. This is different in DC, okay? So we'll cover the differences between DC and Maryland at the end. So for a Class C contractor, this is the lowest level classification for a contracting company. This applies to general contractors, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, handyman, everyone that's doing any type of work on a building or structure in the state of Virginia. A Class C contractor, they work on single contracts for $1,000 or more, but less than $7,500. So a lot of handyman companies have this type of license, and it's totally legitimate for them to carry only this license type as long as they're not doing contracts for more than $7,500. And they're not, of course, doing anything that violates the terms of their license. Like if they're not licensed for electrical, they're not doing electrical, et cetera. They're also limited to in gross receipts. These are all gross receipt numbers. Contracts totaling less than $150,000 over a 1-year period. So you'll see some smaller trade companies with Class C licenses, but mostly you're just looking at handymen here. Sometimes you'll see like smaller companies that do like driveway resurfacing that are Class C contractors because they're doing the same thing for lower contract amounts. Just so you're aware what it takes to get these, all you really have to do is go take a small course and pass a short test and then pay a fee. So there's not a lot of difficulty in getting one of these licenses. Okay. The Class B contractor license in the state of Virginia is what a lot of companies have. Your kitchens and baths, your trade companies, even a lot of your general contractors will have a Class B. The Class B contractor, they can work on single contracts of under $70,000 or contracting, but I'm sorry, less than $70,000 or $150,000, but less than $500,000 in 1 year. So again, this is total receipts. So if you have 5 guys working for you in these companies, you can hit these limits pretty quickly, okay? So the Class B contractor still allows a lot of flexibility in order to do specific trade scopes, right? You're probably not on a single family residential project going to spend, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars on only electrical, for instance. So a lot of the smaller trade companies will have these types of licenses, and will also, excuse me, they'll also have them if it's like a kitchen and bath company. So if you go to, you know, the smaller guys like Ryco, those types of companies, they'll be Class A because they do enough volume where they're required to have it. But a lot of the smaller kitchen and bath shops will be Class B. I would say probably 80% of those types of companies are Class B contractors. And then you have the Class A contractor. They can work on any value contract in the state of Virginia. And this is a more difficult licensure to get. The Class A contractors actually have to prove $45,000 of liquidity in order to get their license issued. There's also a relief fund that's tied to the money that goes into these Class A certifications for contractors that do the wrong thing and you know, it hurts the general public, and they can get compensated from the relief fund for the money that goes into this account. Class A contractors, in order to do certain things, need an additional certification. It's a builder technical exam. So that's a very challenging exam to pass in the state of Virginia. It's basically like a light engineering exam. Our company holds the Class A with the BLD certification, and that truly allows you to build anything in the state of Virginia. So if you don't have that BLD certification in addition to your Class A license, you can't do structural remediation. So for all of you realtors that have clients where you're writing contracts that say, fix this deck that has a structural issue, or you know, or opening, or the clients move in, they want to open up a wall or do anything like that. If they don't have the builder's technical license, then they're not licensed to do that type of work, and there's a lot of liability there. So you want to pay close attention to make sure that if they're doing any major structural work, that they have that certification. There's a lot more to doing that type of work as well, and we'll get into that a little bit later. Now in Maryland, you get an HIC contractor's license, and it doesn't have these types of levels. So the HIC contractor level in Maryland allows you to pretty much do whatever you want. For the construction, you need a separate salesperson for it, but it's much less involved than what Virginia has. Maryland is a very interesting state with a lot of their rules and regulations. You know, one of the indicators for that is how they handle renovation contracting and the licensure thereof. In DC, it's the other end. Go figure, the bureaucracy capital of the world has more bureaucracy to building things, right? So for instance, in DC, we only hold a Class B license because it allows us to do work up to $5 million. So there's just huge projects that go on in DC that require a specialized license that's just tremendously challenging to get. And also grossly unnecessary for pretty much all residential renovation. Even most commercial construction doesn't total contracts of greater than $5 million. So in DC, it's a little different. So this is one of the areas where there's the biggest variance between the class level of licenses between DC, Maryland, and Virginia.
Nate, before you pass on the next one, so are these amounts just labor, not material, correct?
No, it's gross receipts. So if we're selling a bathroom and it's a $20,000 bathroom and we're only putting, $10,000 of labor and materials to it, it's the $20,000 that counts against the total amount that they're allowed to run in a single year. So.
Okay, so if the owner decides to bring something from Italy and that's worth whatever, that has to be counted on?
No. So it's only by the contract amount. So whatever that contract value is what goes against the total receipts for that year. So for instance, if so a client's providing all of their own materials, then it would just be labor and markup.
Okay.
That would go against it. It goes by what the contracts show, the total contract amount.
Okay, perfect.
Nate, I have a question about you said that if you were to combine all of the contracts for the year, and you have like 5 different contractors and I'm sorry, I'm not explaining that because I didn't understand what you said by that. You said like if for a class B, if they had 5 different people working, it had to be totaling less than the 500,000. Is that right?
Yeah. So as the licensed entity. So for us, the licensed entity is More Construction Group. Individuals don't get licensed for this level. So you, if you have a number of employees underneath you, I guess that was maybe a little bit confusing. Okay. Forget about the number of employees. It only relates to the amount of signed contracts. How much money is that company, that licensed entity bringing in? That's what's important. How much money are they putting in their bank account from their contracting enterprise is what is limited here. Okay.
Okay, I understand now. Thank you.
Chris, that's an excellent question. The Class B contractor, can they get the BLD technical? The answer is, I don't know. I am not sure if a Class B can get the BLD technical certification. It's never been asked before. So I don't have that answer. I can certainly look into it though, because it would be good for, for all of our knowledge, right? Okay. Anybody that, I don't want to spam the whole group of realtors with answers that they don't need. So if you are interested in that answer, I'll look into it and get back to you. At the end of this, I'll put some contact information up so you can just shoot over an email. If you want to be part of that, then I'll shoot over the answer to that question once I am able to research it and see what that answer is. Let's see here. All right, any other questions on the types of contractors and the levels before we move on to the next session of how to qualify them?
Yes, I have a question about that.
Sure.
I could envision for example, Arlington County, a homeowner with bad steps leading up to their deck in the back, 4 steps maximum, let's say, and the stringers are rotted, carpenter bees or whatever, need to tear that out, probably reuse the synthetic decking, but going to redo that. That's obviously structural, but I would have thought a handyman for $1,200 could do that. And are you telling me instead it's got to be somebody that's got the BLD technical certificate?
Another great question. And so again, this is a Class 4 CE credit. So the strict answer on your question is yes. For any structural work, you need to have a licensed BLD contractor to perform structural work. This is one of the things that we get a lot of questions and a lot of pushback on, but unfortunately that is what the letter of the law states. And it actually goes one step farther than that. In the state of Virginia, for that situation that you just described, in order to do a remediation, if the whole deck, if you modify a portion of a structure, that whole structure needs to be brought up to modern code. So if the rest of that deck structure is built on 4x4s instead of 6x6s, then technically speaking, that deck needs to come down, or it needs to have a structural engineer stamp with a remediation report on it. This is why this is one of the most violated rules in the state of Virginia, because the difference between doing it by the letter of the law and doing it incorrectly, or more simply, is so much time, effort, energy, and money. Okay, so by the letter of the law, yes, you do need to have either a structural engineer stamp the remediation, or you need to bring up the whole structure to proper code, and it does need to be done by a company that's licensed to perform structural work. You run into this a lot too with attic space. There's attics that were stick built, 150 years ago that in no way meet modern code, and they put it on a home inspection report that one of them is damaged. Okay, you need a structural engineer stamp for that in order to be able to get that done. These are things that are costly, but you just be aware, if you recommend just your client to get a handyman or something to go take care of this, there is liability there, because I can tell you from so many years of experience, a lot of yours is simple, right? A lot of times the handyman, they go in and they do terrible structural remediation work, and it can result in a lot of damage and a lot of personal injury. So there is a reason why the rules exist, but they are often not followed. Any other questions with the contractor levels and licensing before we move on?
Nate, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Could you just tell us a little bit about the BLD certification that you mentioned before?
Sure. So there's 2 exams that you need to be able to take to be able to build anything in the state of Virginia. One is your Class A contractors exam, which is quite simple in comparison. And the other one is a light engineering exam for the BLD technical, that ensures that the contractor that's licensed to do it understands basically what I just said, what the proper steps are. They're able to perform calculations to be able to carry loads based on a number of different factors, things like that. So, it's 2 separate exams in order to get that certification.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay. Moving on here. So, is the contractor properly licensed? In Virginia, this is super easy. If you're a realtor in this class, all you have to do is just click on or search DPOR license lookup, and you'll be able to look up any company and be able to see all of the licenses they have. So here's us. You can just pull us up real quick, and it shows that we're a Class A. We have the residential building, the commercial building, CEC, the gas fitting, the plumbing, the electrical, and the Class A. So this is easy to search. You can just make sure that everyone that you're recommending passes all of the qualifications in order to do the type of work you're recommending. If you are just trying to recommend small handyman type of work, much less important to check everything. You just have to know exactly what you're recommending for clients matches up with what the requirements are to get that type of work performed. So once you check their license level, so for instance, if you're building an addition and it's $150,000, you know that you need to have a Class A. If you're having somebody fix a leaky faucet, Class C is fine. But you also want to make sure that they at least have that Class C license. A lot of these smaller guys don't have any licenses at all. So, you have to be mindful of making sure that even at the lower level, they have licenses and insurance, because if something happens, even that leaky faucet can cause, tens of thousands of dollars of damage if improperly repaired, and there can be a lot of liability there. So once you check to make sure they have the proper license level, then you want to check to make sure that they have the appropriate trade licensing for the project. So if the project entails, so if it's that addition and it's going to have building, plumbing, electrical, HVAC, you want to look on there and make sure that they have all of the licenses appropriate for that type of work. If you if they don't have a plumbing, electrical, or HVAC license, you just want to make sure that those permits are being pulled by another reputable company that's working under that general contract. So it's totally fine and legal for them to sub out work to specialized trades. Again, for us, we sub out all of our HVAC work. It's totally legitimate to do that. You just have to make sure that the proper permits are being pulled by these contractors. The overall contract for you or your clients is going to be held by the general contractor. So they're ultimately responsible for paying their workers' comp and their liability insurance. So you don't really have to check into the subcontractors that closely because it's all going to be covered under the general contractor, but you do want to make sure that the permits are being pulled properly for those subs. Additionally, and this is a big way that a lot of people work around it, you want to check, is that the scope of work on the permit matches what the scope of work that's actually being performed is. Because a lot of times people won't want to follow the proper, they don't want to have their whole project inspected. So they'll pull a permit to change one fixture when they're rewiring the whole house, and then they'll do a terrible job of rewiring the whole house. So you want to make sure that whatever that permit shows is the actual work being performed. It's very important to not get in trouble with.
Nate, I'm sorry, I have one quick question. Can I ask now about the prior slide?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so we actually had this. I had a client who bought a house on Kirby Road and with a big, very well-known company. So like, for instance, you say Moore Construction Corporate gets the license. So, and then you send someone to fix whatever pipe or something. So, I mean, obviously you're covering us, but now who is the person, let's say the plumber, are you hired? Are we supposed to check that you guys are hired, like the company hires a licensed plumber, or do you train your own people to be licensed plumbers? Or how do we check that? Because we had a huge problem. We had to, anyways, it was about foundation stuff. And then when my client got over, obviously the big company paid for whatever the costs were. But the thing is, like, we weren't able to verify if in fact the person who went there was licensed or not.
Mm-hmm. So for the subcontractors, this is what the next slide is about the insurance for these things. Mm-hmm. How much to look into the subcontractors being used by the general contractor is generally up to you. For instance, for us, when we onboard any contractor, if they don't have the proper insurance and license, well, they have to have the proper licenses, otherwise they won't get the permits. But if they don't have the proper insurance, we have to pay, the general contractor has to pay their insurance for them. So it's very unlikely, unless you're a terrible general contractor, that you're going to be hiring subcontractors that don't have appropriate insurance, because that just means at the end of the year, you're paying it for them. So does it happen? Sure, of course it happens, but it's on the spectrum of things to be worried about, that's generally much lower on the spectrum of things to be worried about than whether or not that original general contractor has the appropriate level of insurance and coverage for the trades. Checking the licenses for the subcontractors. I mean, if you want to go to that level of detail, that's certainly fine, to dig that deep. But again, it's much more important to check the licensure of the general contractor, and just make sure that the permits are correct. Specific situations withstanding. I mean, I'm amazed every year how people can finagle the system to do things improperly. So there definitely are ways that can happen. I see a couple other questions here. Yes, Moore Construction Group, we are a design build. We do our architectural design in-house, although for certain things we do use other architectural firms, just depending. We try to fit people with the best fit for what their project is. Like, we had a meeting with someone today who has a historic house that they need a variance on right in our hometown here of Old Town Alexandria. and we're going to refer them over to a local architect, Steve Clincy, because he's going to be better at being able to navigate for them through the variance process. So we do our own architectural work unless there's a reason for us to bring in a separate expert. So apply for subcontractors, a Class A contract. So any subcontractors, I'm not sure what the question is there. Does this also apply for subcontractors and the Class A contractor works with? So if you have clarification for that. Any subcontractor that works under a contractor, if they don't have the comp insurance, yes, they have to pay. That's why for us and for most general contractors that are good at what they do, they'll have an onboarding process where they get listed as an additionally insured for their subcontractors. So if that insurance lapses or isn't paid or isn't renewed, they get a notice directly. So yes, it does apply to that. So homeowners who pull their own permits and hire a company to do the work, this is just always a terrible idea. What you're doing when you pull permits as a homeowner and have somebody else go in and do the work is you're assuming all of the liability. There couldn't possibly be a bigger red flag that whomever you're hiring is doing something wrong than for them to ask you to pull your own permits. So that is just something that you have to be immensely worried about doing. For instance, you're 100% responsible for everything that happens. If they don't have insurance, you're responsible for all the liability for everything that's done. If they do something and it's bad and it's broken, if they didn't pull the permits, then they can get out of having to bear responsibility for that. So it's one of the riskiest things you could do in this industry is pull permits and then get guys who want to have the permits pulled do the work. There are some exceptions for this, like in DC. In DC, homeowners can pull permits for large scale projects because they're ultimately responsible anyways. It's a little different than the way things work in Maryland and Virginia. So it is somewhat common for that, but that's the only reason that happens in DC typically is because you're working with an architectural firm. You're already engaging experts. You're only having expert companies bid the work, and you don't know which one you're going to pick yet. So then you can just put the construction permit or the general building permit under the homeowner's name. But then that should immediately be then transferred to whichever general contractor is actually performing the work. So, but yeah, that's very risky business. Okay, so now we'll get into we've talked a little bit about insurance. These are the slides for the insurance we'll go over now. General liability insurance covers claims arising from the insured's liability due to damage or injury caused by negligence or acts of omission during the performance of his or her duties in business. So most of these companies will have general liability insurance. What you want to watch out especially for is whether or not they have workers' compensation insurance. This is a policy purchased by a firm to cover workers' compensation costs. It's a premium rate, varies according to the nature of the employee's work, and is based on the employer's payroll. It's also called workman's comp insurance. It's very expensive. Workers' comp is very expensive. Again, general contractors usually aren't foolish enough to have guys working who don't carry it, knowing that they'll just have to pay it at the end of the year. Now, this is saying that they're big enough to actually be audited for their comp. So if they do any volume of business, their insurance companies will perform audits on them and they'll find it and they'll charge them for it. We're down to about 25 minutes left for the course for the full hour. So we're going to have to move along a little bit quicker. There's an unprecedented number of attendees to this class. So I know there's a lot of questions, but we got to get through the meat and potatoes here first. So, so we covered whether or not they're properly licensed and insured, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they are a good company. There's a lot of properly licensed and insured companies out here who you'll have a terrible experience with. So how do you make sure that they're a quality company? Well, personal referrals is a great way. If other people have had good work done by a specific company, then, that's a good indicator they'll do good work for you as well. Internet ratings, incredibly useful, incredibly popular, more and more each year. Home Advisor is a good one to check. Whenever people refer or ask us for things that we don't have a direct referral on, we suggest that they check Home Advisor to find an appropriate contractor for what they're looking for, because you can't pay for reviews on Home Advisor. Testimonials, another good one, and references. Most companies will offer references when asked. We do quarterly reference lists when people ask for them, where it'll show lists of similar projects that were done or larger projects that were done. So it never hurts to ask for references. And a lot of this is good for both parties too, because a lot of contractors want, every client isn't right for them. You want to have a good fit both ways. You want to pick a contractor that's a good fit for the client, but also a client that's a good fit for the contractor. For instance, if somebody asks us to, go and just do a small bathroom remodel, sure, we'll go do it, but we're probably not the best fit because you don't need the resources we have to bear to just replace bathroom. You don't need a project manager. You don't need an account manager. You don't need, a project expediter just to do a bathroom. So you might be better off getting a kitchen and bath contractor, for instance. So, it goes both ways, but you always want to do a little bit of research, especially if you're a realtor and you're putting your name out there recommending somebody to do work. Do the little bit of homework to make sure that not only are they properly licensed and insured for what you're referring them to, but also that they're going to likely do a good job for the clients. So permitting, when is a permit required? So permits are required for construction or demolition of any building or structure. Okay. Installations or alterations involving the removal or addition of any wall, partition, or portion thereof. This is very important. So that pass through that you want to have clients cut, it absolutely requires a permit, and 6 times out of 10 it's going to be a structural project. So you can't ever refer just that unlicensed or underlicensed handyman to take out any portion of a wall. If we had more time, I could tell you stories all day about why that's a terrible idea. Any structural component, also, you got to pull a permit, and all the jurisdictions around us are generally very good at making sure, as long as a permit's being pulled for the scope that matches, that whoever's doing the work does it correctly. It almost never happens where there's a structural issue that results in people following the processes with their jurisdiction, because the process is very tight as long as they're getting what they're doing properly permitted. Repair or replacement of any component of a fire or smoke rated assembly. This causes a lot of problems for people in DC. We give people terrible news because the fire ratings between multiple units, habitable units or between garages and anything that's a fire rated assembly, it needs to be brought up to modern code. It opens a can of worms. So it would be way cheaper to not get that permit, but boy, you better get the permit. Any egress system, same thing. It's people's lives getting in and out of the space. It's also oftentimes structural in the case of egress windows, et cetera, to make sure that, that stuff is done correctly and permitted. Plus, in order to have legal bedrooms, you need to have proper egress. Water supply distribution, sanitary, any plumbing that's inside the walls or any electrical that's inside the walls requires permits. Fire protection systems, mechanical, fuel supply systems all require permits, and then any equipment regulated by VCC requires a permit as well. Anytime there's a change of occupancy or even a change of use. So if it was a salon and it's going to be an office, even if nothing else changes, you still need to get a permit because it's a change of use. A new certificate of occupancy is required when the change of occupancy requires a greater degree of structural strength, fire protection, means of egress, ventilation, or sanitation. A lot of this pertains to commercial, but it applies to everything, even in residential. For instance, if you're changing a CL zone, which is light commercial, into a residence, all of this stuff applies. Or vice versa, a CL residence into a commercial space, all of this applies. So I see some other questions coming through too. We'll get back to those shortly here. A a lot of the questions for what does and doesn't require a permit will be answered in the section. If you still have a question, then just ping me on that. Movement of a lot line that increases hazard or decreases the level of safety to an existing building or structure in comparison to the building code under which such building or structure was constructed. This is a little asinine because anytime you're talking about moving a lot line, it does require the permit regardless. So whether or not it affects those things or not. Removal or disturbing any asbestos containing materials during the construction or demolition of a building or structure, including additions. Asbestos is very serious. It's relatively easy to identify in a lot of circumstances if you know what you're looking for. And there are specific ways that it needs to be addressed. It's another one of those situations where it can be $500 to have done incorrectly and then $5,000 to be done correctly. But it's a health and safety issue. It gives you cancer, just do it correctly. Definitely don't advise clients to do work unpermitted and asbestos containing areas. Okay, now, how do we check if work done has been permitted? Okay, so as realtors who are doing their best fiduciary responsibilities to maintain that a house that is being sold or being purchased by your client is worth what it is supposed to be worth. A big component of this that's often overlooked is whether or not work has been permitted, because the difference in value for an unpermitted house can be dramatically different than one permitted, especially in areas where there's non-compliant spaces, like basements that are finished without adequate head clearance, or additions that were built without permits. Again, this is one of the things that we've seen so many people lose so much money on. And you're in the top 5% of realtors out there if you check a permit history for the people who are buying houses, right? Because it's a great, it's a great service to offer clients. So you can call the county or city building department and ask if a specific project has been permitted. Calling, you have varying degrees of success. The best way used to be, although now you can't really do it too much, is going down to the county office. If you have specific circumstances where you think something is not permitted, going down to the office is really the best way. Or you can check, a lot of the jurisdictions around here have online systems that are pretty good. So you can check the online systems first. If any of this is confusing for you, us and other companies offer permit searching and this type of work. We do it for $105 an hour. Oftentimes it's the best few $100s you could spend to figure out whether or not the addition that was built needs to be torn down, because that does happen. We've dealt with an unfortunate amount of unpermitted additions that didn't meet the zoning requirements and needed to be modified or removed. So, you know, very important to check and make sure that this stuff is being done. I see a note here. That's a good question. If you have a permit that has been administratively finalized without all inspections, what can be done? You have to call and get the final inspections for those permits. It can be a can of worms. But just because at least they had rough inspections though, so they likely won't make you rip up walls to check what's behind the walls. You're just missing a final inspection. But unique and challenging situations like that, the best thing to do is to engage a company that does that kind of remediation work, us or other companies like us, who will actually go and be able to advise. Each case is different. If permits aren't closed out, or if something was unpermitted, I mean, you as realtors, this isn't your area of expertise to clean up these types of complicated messes. So I would recommend just engaging professionals to deal with it for you. Warning signs of unpermitted work. The best way to identify unpermitted work is by checking, of course, to see if it was permitted or not. As realtors, it's also a great service to ask the clients, or I'm sorry, if you're representing a buyer or a seller for that matter, to ask for copies of the permits to see that they actually have permits. If you're representing a seller and they have all proper permits for it and they give you copies of it, great. Now your listing is that much stronger because you have copies of the paperwork for the work that was done. If you're representing the buyer, you can always start by asking the buyer too. If they have unpermitted work that does constitute a material defect in the property. So if there is unpermitted work there and you're at a home inspection phase, you can use that to get that remedied because it's a material defect. And if you just, if the realtor conceals it or says, oh, you guys want the permits for this, we're just going to not sell it to you anymore and we'll go sell it to someone else. Well, now you've uncovered a material defect. And if they list it without disclosing it or remedying it, they're in violation of their license as a realtor. So now, of course, if you clients, I see another note here. If you have clients that want to put a house on the market that didn't have permits, nobody's stopping anyone from listing a house as is, right? You can sell houses in as is condition with no warranties. But if you do know of a material defect of any nature for a house, it does need to be disclosed to prospect buyers. If you have concerns about the legality or their license ramifications for you, ask your broker. Okay. So the best way to identify unpermitted work is by checking with the county to verify, as we said. Some red flags include partially finished or unfinished remodeling work, and there's no way permits were closed out around here. We have really good building departments in the DMV. They, relatively speaking, they wouldn't never pass anything that looks wrong. Lack of GFCI outlets in kitchens remodeled after 1987. Lack of GFCI outlets in exterior bathrooms remodeled after 1975. This doesn't mean that they didn't get permits for it, because if they didn't move anything in the walls, they didn't need to update it. It's just the red flag, enough to make you ask the question. Poor quality workmanship or anything that doesn't look quite right. You guys see a lot of houses. If they're in a house and it doesn't look quite right, it probably isn't. So, those are red flags that should give you impetus to look into these things with a little bit more effort. So what happens if your buyers buy a house with unpermitted work? This is some of the questions here. And again, I'll give you guys the link for everything that we have all of this stuff hosted online. Also, you can put your requests through the website or at info@. There's just no way I'm going to be able to get to everyone's. So if you're not on our mailing list and you want to get these answers, just go ahead and join the mailing list for More Construction Group. You can click on it anywhere on our website or download the free How to Hire a Contractor report. It'll add you to the mailing list as well. And then, we can get some of this stuff answered. But again, there's a lot of material here, so can't get to everything. So if your buyers buy unpermitted work, the properties purchased with unpermitted work transfer the violations to the new owners. This is one thing that a lot of people don't understand. You are buying these defects when you buy the house. Just like if there's HOA violations, you own that property now. Title issues, when the transfer goes through, they get cleared up with the title company. Nobody clears up permitting issues and HOA issues when the closings go through generally. So the responsibility for fixing it now, it goes with the new owner. So this does often involve partial or complete demolition of unpermitted areas, exploratory work to verify unpermitted scope is up to code, fines, and even condemnations of structures. I have seen all of this. It's definitely a concern when you buy things that have had improper work done on them, especially in the higher dollar areas. A lot of it flies under the radar a little bit more in the less expensive areas, but you're talking about DC, Arlington, City of Alexandria, there's just no way this isn't going to be a problem for your buyers if you have unpermitted work that is going to come up on a home inspection report, for instance. Okay, so permits for commercial versus residential. We'll just go over this really quickly because this course isn't about commercial. The point here for these slides is to just indicate that large multifamily houses are commercial buildings. You do not have all of the rights for commercial buildings or that you do if you own a single family home. Okay, commercial has much more strict requirements. Condos and townhomes can be considered commercial if they're over 4 stories. And your potential scope for remodeling project is grossly limited when you're in a commercial property. You cannot necessarily by right remove that wall you want to remove. There might be structural members in there that you can't take down that'll affect the rest of the building. So there's a lot of things that people don't realize that can't be done in condo buildings specifically, high rises, anything over 4 stories. You don't have as many rights as you think you do. Okay. So I will stop there just for a minute because we're going to get into the estimating portion. Is there any questions that haven't been answered that we need an answer for now?
You
Okay.
talked about plumbing, electrical behind the wall. And so for things like vanities or, changing lights over the mirror, those kinds of things, I'm assuming don't need permits.
So that's an excellent question. I've been moving fast, so I kind of skipped over that. There are certain things that can be done without a permit. Basically, you can disconnect and reconnect or repair any fixtures that are inside or inside the house, not inside the walls. So without a permit, you can replace the vanity. You can reconnect the plumbing for another sink. You can't run new plumbing for the sink, but you can reconnect the plumbing. Or if there's a leaking supply line, you can change a leaking supply line. You can change light fixtures. You can move outlets up to 1 foot in any direction, as long as you don't have to go in the walls and change the Romex that runs to power those outlets. So there are limited things. For instance, when we talked about the GFCI, it's not a silver bullet, because even we wouldn't pull a permit to do a pull and replace in a bathroom if we're not modifying any of the systems. If we're just demoing out the tile, the toilet, the fixtures, and then putting in new, permit isn't required. We're not required to go in and change that GFCI in most jurisdictions under most circumstances. So there is a lot that can be done without permits. It's just the best thing that I can give, for teaching a realtor class is that if it's in the wall, it needs a permit. It's not a perfect explanation, but it's close enough for your guys' purposes to just know that if you're tinkering around with plumbing and electrical or HVAC systems behind the scenes, you need to have a permit for it. Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Every commercial building has its own requirements. Yes, this is a way longer question that applies differently to each different type of building for the condo associations. Everyone has different requirements. Some buildings actually require you to provide copies of the original building plans to prove that things aren't load bearing or structural. So it just really, really depends. Those of you that work with various homeowners associations, they vary in the same magnitude that regular HOAs vary. Okay. All right. We'll go ahead and move through. There's only a handful of slides left. We want to get through this, and then we'll stay back for just a few minutes to answer some more questions at the end. So now we're going to talk about estimating remodeling costs. We're going to do this pretty quickly because it's going to be a little bit challenging to get into any detail with the time we have allotted. So the first thing we want to do is identify an area which we need to renovate. There's apps on the phones, the new iPhone 12s and all of those things that have LiDAR. You can do quick measures and get a general idea of what the sizes of space are. And then you just apply that to costs. So these are the renovation cheat sheets that we've been handing out for about 10 years. Most of this stuff we won't even do. We aren't the best fit for it, but we find that it's very handy for realtors to have this as a reference point when clients ask how much to paint this whole house or how much to put new carpet upstairs or what have you. So in all of our emails that you get on the system, there's a way to add our contact. If you add our contact to any of your devices, this information, as well as a bunch of other useful information, is in that contact card. So when you open up our contact and view all the details, you'll see this information in there, along with when GFCIs are required or not. So there's a lot of this that was done. Sorry, it's really hard to pay attention to three things: people talking, the text, and the slides. So apologize for that. So all of this is available there. It's also available on the website, which I'll share with you all as well. It just gives you quick and dirty numbers to be able to figure out roughly how much these common things for figuring things out for costs. So now determining ROI. This basically allows you to be better advisors to your clients, and again, adding more value by giving them an option to potentially perform some repairs, clean up some issues in order to get them more money. Okay. So the way that this is done is you do a CMA for the house as it sits now, and then a CMA for the house as you would propose it to be renovated. Okay. Now, when that's done, you can figure out what kind of money you're going to spend in order to, or have your client spend in order to make the house as it sits now match favorably with the houses that are selling at the higher price point. So, you know, the most common ones of these are, you know, carpet paint, you know, kitchen, bath renovation, things like that. In a lot of areas that are high dollar. I mean, one thing that I will point out to every realtor that's on this call is it's just a change in the way that the market works right now. Houses in a lot of these areas are selling for $500, $600, $700 a square foot. It almost always makes financial sense in these areas to add on, right? Because we build additions for $200, $300 a square foot, and they sell for $500, $600, $700 a square foot. So if you're looking at trying to net clients the most money possible, the numbers didn't used to make sense the way they do now. But now, I mean, people can add a lot of value in these high dollar areas by adding that square footage. So that isn't part of these slides because it just didn't used to be the case when the slides were created, but it is now. So this explains the equation, but basically all you're doing is you're just looking at how much the house would sell for now, how much would it sell for if it was all fixed up, and then you get a construction budget for it. We offer complimentary rough number estimates for renovations via email. There's some information for that about on the website too. If it's small stuff, you can use the cards and get a pretty good idea. And then if it's something that sellers are interested in, we do free estimates for people who own the house. So we will go and do estimates for people who own the house. If it's something that we don't do or we're not the best fit, we know a lot of people, we refer things out accordingly as well. So just some real quick examples. These are very old. These are probably 10-year-old examples. So it'll highlight more of what the market's been doing over the past decade. So for instance, here we have a house that sold for $225,000. The comps had a new kitchen, and a new kitchen at this time was $15,000, and they netted an additional $40,000. These were actual case studies in 2009 or something when we put this together originally. And being able to present something like this to your sellers, it just adds value, you know, to your clients, to be able to give them an option of getting an investment. The regular market investment isn't going to net the kind of return that a lot of this stuff will, especially given the time and energy that needs to be put into it. So for instance, another house, the exact same house with just carpet and paint, sold for an extra $24,500. This one here sold with just a new kitchen, got another $44,000. If you take a weakest point in some of these properties and make it into a positive point, you're solving a problem while adding an additional value. The numbers speak for themselves on getting better returns for your clients and netting them more money at closing. So one other thing that I'll show you, I might as well show on the website here, a couple of these things. So under services, if you go to classes, these are the class details here. Then you have downloads right under services. So our website is moreconstructiongroup.com. This is the section that has everything that I was just showing. So you didn't need to be, you know, rushing to write everything down. Everything is here, including the remodeling class for Maryland. This is a little dated, but it's still active. You know, there's a lot of the stuff that's available here. Pre-purchase considerations guide. There's a lot of good resources available. Then the best way to get that realtor cheat sheet is to just add us as a contact. If you want a physical copy of them, you can just shoot us a note and we'll mail a few of them to your real estate offices or your homes or what have you. Or you can, you know, get a PDF and print it out yourself as well. So those when these classes were in person, we would bring all of these materials and let people take them. Unfortunately, that's not the world we currently live in.
I'm sorry, how do we add you as a contact?
So on all of our email marketing, all the way on the bottom, there'll be a link that says add us as a contact, and it'll do just that. You just click on it from your device that you want to add it as, and then it'll, under the notes, under the contact in your Outlook or Gmail or what have you, it will contain all of this information.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, no problem. So there's that. Then we have the pre-purchase evaluations. We do email analysis to give just a rough idea for ballpark on things if realtors want quick numbers. This is first come, first serve, as it is free. Sometimes, it takes a little bit of time to get these turned around. Then we also do on-site analysis. This is very useful for a lot of reasons. We charge $200 to come out, but we also will do a quick permit history search, and you can save clients a lot of money by having us out. I was out on one today where the guy wanted to build an addition, was buying the house because he could build an addition, and he can't build the addition. So he got out of a sale of or a purchase of a house that he couldn't do what he wanted to because he actually had his realtor advise him to do the proper homework. So these are the things that we offer. And then this is what we were talking about. If you have situations where there's just a mess and it needs to be cleaned up, we do feasibility studies and we do clean up people's messes with unpermitted work. It's generally done at an hourly basis until we get to a point where we know what scope needs to be done in order to close out the permits. If it's just the final inspection that's missing, it's generally pretty simple, but it just depends on each individual case. If you want to have more detail done for proper detailed estimates, then we do these design packages where we do, because somebody asked if we did architectural work. So we'll do schematic design and architectural work. We give people online access to our portal. All of their stuff stays here from when they start the project until after the project is complete. All their bills are paid through it, etc. But it also starts with schematic design, where we do drawings with 3 renovation options. It can be done for as little as a room or as much as a mansion. And then we do a brief written scope along with budget numbers. So if you're asking how much does it cost to gut renovate a house and reconfigure it and build on additions, you probably can't use the cheat sheet to figure that out. So in those cases, you can do schematic design, and we'll give you a full analysis of everything that can be done and roughly what it'll cost, and get you access to the system to keep all of that stuff organized throughout the process. So those are the 2 things that that we can do to help with the budgeting and ROI calculations. In summary, so we covered the contractor basics. Hopefully after this class, you have a good idea of how to identify contractors to make sure they have proper licensing and insurance in the state of Virginia. Check and make sure they're quality companies you want to work with. We had to run through a lot of this pretty quickly, but hopefully you have a pretty good understanding now of what does and doesn't need to be permitted, when they're required, how to check if work was permitted or not permitted. It's much more challenging now that we can't physically have people go to the building offices, but it still gets done. And then what, of course, buying unpermitted work means to your clients, or if your clients are selling unpermitted work, what that means to them and to you for your liability in those regards as well. And that fact that it does constitute material defects for properties. We covered very quickly how to estimate construction costs, quick stuff. You can use the cards for more complicated stuff, email analysis or site visits, or architectural design packages. The design a house one that we showed is $1,800. Designing a floor is $1,200, and then doing a room is $900. So those services are offered there that will really help you do the ROI for the major projects. I see some other notes here for questions. I'm going to circle back here. I believe at this point, you guys have met the requirements to get your CE credit. So if you want to drop out now, you're more than welcome to do so. I'll spend the next few minutes going over some of these questions. Again, there's no way we're going to get to all of them. So if you have more that you're looking for, the best way to reach us is to email info@morecg.com, which I just sent over, or just fill out our contact us form on the website. We get lots of requests. Emailing people directly, things get lost. So following through the channels properly just ensures that we don't have your requests slip through the cracks. I appreciate it. It was my pleasure talking to everyone here. It's a new medium for me, as I said, so I'm glad glad we got through it relatively unscathed. So there's some questions here for the FHA. We actually do teach a separate course for renovation financing. It's a course that we haven't taught since the pandemic started. So if there's a lot of desire for us to teach another one, we certainly will. There's just a ton there. There's all kinds of different options. And yes, we actually have a specific product on our website to get people started with that. So under our website, order services, these are the schematic designs, the site evaluation, and then we have a 203K bank loan package. This gets them a full packet to be able to get those types of loans started and closed. That was one of the questions there. Yes, we work with rehabbers and investors. What you'll find is that we're generally more expensive to do rehab work than most of the contract. We're a full service design build firm, so it's generally too expensive to have us do things like that, rehabs anymore these days, because when you're an investor, you need to get everything done as cheaply as possible, and we're just no longer that. We can help clean up messes from investment properties, and we can help design and permit things for investment companies, which we still do, but generally investors can't afford the level of customer service and expertise that we have, unless it's a really massive project. So I think, do we allow...
sheet? I'm sorry. I was going to ask, is a cheat sheet on the website, or we need to request that?
So you can request it and we'll send it over. It's all of the information for the cheat sheet stuff. If you got the email from us to join this class, if you scroll to the bottom of it, it's on all of our emails. It says add us as a contact, and then it'll be on there as well. If you can't figure it out or you can't find it, just shoot us a note and we'll figure it out for you.
Thanks.
If getting paid at closing, we only do contracts where it's through a financing agency. We can't wait for closing to get paid like some smaller companies with smaller projects can do. That's it has to be tied to an actual form of financing. That's one of the questions here. Okay, well, thank you for all your kind words. I appreciate you all taking the time to join us for this class. Again, if you have other inquiries or you want more information, just go ahead and fill out the form on our website or email us at info@morecg.com, and we'll help out how we can. All right, everyone have a great evening.
Thank you, Nate.
My pleasure. Take care, guys.
Thank you.